your flesh and blood.
Welcome to Tell Me Your Story, new paradigms for a new world where we're giving you choices and knowledge of those choices to help make your dreams come true. We are here 9 times a week, Sundays at 7 a.m. and 7 p.m., Monday mornings at 1 a.m., Wednesdays at 9 a.m., and Monday through Friday from 8 to 9 a.m., streaming live at all those times at richarddugan.com. We are on SoundCloud, iTunes, TuneIn Radio, Spotify, Stitcher, Player FM, as well as YouTube, where you can watch these conversations. I hope that you will take time to subscribe and click notifications so that when a new conversation is posted, you'll be notified and you'll be able to tune in, listen in, and learn, be entertained and inspired. A reminder that Choices, which is my book, 5 Steps for Life, it's available on Amazon.com in paperback, hardcover, and Kindle with Audible, soon to be released. We also ask that if you can support the work that we are doing financially, we do have a PayPal account. It is there for your security as well as ours. And when they ask for an email address to whom you're sending, please go to richard@richarddugan.com. That's the email address. If you go to richarddugan.com, there is also a link directly to PayPal so that you can send us whatever support you can. And we thank you to those who have helped and to those who will help. We also ask that you take time during this decade of perfect vision, the 2020s, to go within to that quiet, peaceful, calm, still place and listen to that still, small voice. And with that, we now take you to our very special interview and guest here on Tell Me Your Story. And welcome to Tell Me Your Story, New Paradigms for a New World. I'm Reverend Dr. D, and I have a very special guest on the program today. He's going to talk about his latest work. It's called, sounds really ominous, Ashes of the Republic. And Jim Chesterton is my guest here on the program. And Jim, first of all, thank you so much for joining us here on the program here on Tell Me Your Story.
Thank you for having me. This is great.
I've been looking forward to this because, first of all, we should state that this is fiction, correct?
Yes, absolutely.
However, as I've seen in some of the information, this could almost be fact. This could almost be, I don't want to go too far here. I don't want to say prophetic by any means, okay? Because that's not the goal of the book. The book is to tell a story of fiction. But it does seem that, and of course, I'm a big space nut, so Jules Verne's and A Flight to the Moon and what have you, and all of that stuff in the early part of the 20th century, who knew that one day we would land a man on the moon in 1969, and then 50 years later, we'd be circling the moon again for the preparations of building a moon base, which, of course, brings to mind a television series. I think it was out of England, called Space, 1999. I don't know if you even remember that one.
No, I remember. I was about to confuse it with the movie, but no, I didn't remember that.
Yeah, well, Space 1999, they built a moon base. And it's all about that whole process. They had a really cool-looking rover that was sort of enclosed. It wasn't open air. It wasn't a convertible like they had back in the 70s,
Right.
But we're not talking about science fiction. We're talking about just in general fiction. I'm curious as to when did the idea come to you to write a book that eventually became Ashes of the Republic?
Around 2022. My life was changing a little bit with regard to my work situation. I was getting a little bit more free time. I originally was an English teacher, but I'd pretty much spent the last 30 years in corporate. So was always looking for an inroad back into something, generally reading more. I stopped reading good stuff for the better part of the 30 years because I was too busy reading PowerPoints. And in 2022, Roe v. Wade was overturned. And when you're working finance, you generally don't spend a lot of time telling people what your politics are. And so most people didn't know where I stood on a lot of topics. And it occurred to me that when I did have discussions with people, they just couldn't understand. They couldn't embrace the idea that the things that were happening today and back then in 2022 have an impact and that they have a long-term impact. And 2022, when they overturned Roe v. Wade, it was the first time where it became obvious, like, okay, these things started. It started with the, obviously the Supreme Court justices and things like that. But once you remove that check, the possibilities are unlimitless, are limitless. And when you remove the mechanisms the in the government and in the society and even in the economy, uh, it's frightening. And unfortunately, nobody shared that because people are busy doing their day to day, right? Most people are not as up on politics as I generally am,
Mm-hmm.
and as my family is. And so I understand, right? And it's not always the most interesting thing, but when I started seeing the aspects of what they were trying to do in the government, what they were trying to do with societal norms and governmental norms, many of which were based on precedent. They weren't based on formal rules. It occurred to me what could happen, and I thought it was really important that people see it. I just wanted to create an image of what it would look like. And to your point about it not being science fiction, it's very intentionally not. And it was actually a debate early on. I have a good friend of mine who corrects me and edits and pretty much tells me everything I'm doing wrong as I'm going through it. And there was a big debate about, well, how much sci-fi do you want in there? And frankly, almost all of the technology that's in the novel is doable today. I'm sure there is nothing, no one's going to go and make money off of any of my ideas because they're on somebody's R&D board somewhere, right?
Yeah.
Absolutely, and so my intent wasn't to wow people with sci-fi. There's no rovers. There is one good piece of transportation, which I won't talk about, but um, for the most part, I wanted people to realize that the changes are with the humans. The changes are with the society. And, 2022 made me angry. My daughter was 19. She's 23. She's about to turn 23. And the risk to women everywhere, just caused by that one thing, right?
Mm-hmm.
It really sort of drove me toward, okay, well, and I had written one book before, but I didn't really push it because I didn't believe in it. And in your first novel, you realize what you're doing wrong. The second time around, I felt like I got it right.
Okay, I'll
And
keep that in mind since I've only written one book so far.
you really do. You look back. It's funny because we're already talking about the sequel, and I'm trying to fix everything I did wrong with this book. With regard to mostly it's around the planning, right? It's about the fact that we had to go back and redo so much stuff because a lot was ambiguous. There wasn't good characterization for a couple of characters, but so I'm confident we're going to be better the next time around. But with regard to the book, it was really, the big concern was, okay, am I going too far? Could this really happen? And remember, this was 23. I think I finished the first draft in 23, and things had calmed down. Now I'm worried I didn't go far enough, and I go pretty far. There are some of the things that are fairly disturbing in the novel, in a could they really do that type thing? And honestly, and by they, I don't mean necessarily the group that's in charge now. I think
Right.
my biggest fear is this is in the moment. This is all part of a much broader effort that started in the 60s with Nixon and continues through the far right. So Christian nationalism, people who believe that this country is strictly a Christian country that must be run by Christians per biblical uh, foundations, and they want to lace that into the government. They want to lace it in law. They're doing it. It's called Project 2025, and that didn't exist in 23.
Hmm.
So the fact that it's starting to come true is making it even more scary for me. So
Well, and some people might even go back 21 years and they might say, well, you know what was really scary, despite what you're talking about in 2022, was what happened following what happened in 2021 or 2001, I beg your pardon,
mhm.
where we created a new department called Homeland Security.
Yep,
And then
yep,
they passed the Patriot Act
absolutely.
and so forth. And everybody is screaming and yelling about how our freedoms are being, and I'm sitting here going, and this is just my perspective, mind you. The only freedoms you say that you're losing are the ones you choose to give up.
Hmm.
When the latest administration took over and was elected in 24, um, and I stand corrected, 23. Everybody that I spoke with who had was in lockstep with the win, they said, "Oh, now we can breathe, we can speak our minds, and we can say whatever we want now because." And I sat there going, I'm not lockstep with that mindset, and I've never been told I couldn't say this or that or the other thing. At the same time, and this is an interesting subject that we might get into, and that is when it comes to the First Amendment and freedom of speech, there is an implicit element that is not mentioned in it. And that is, yes, indeed, you have the freedom to say whatever you want. You also have a responsibility. And I don't know if it was actually the Supreme Court who ruled on this or not years and years and years ago that said, all right, you have freedom of speech, but you cannot yell fire in a crowded movie house.
That's right.
That's where the line is. And so when I start to, and I guess I should preface this by saying that this actually, in terms of the example you gave, actually started even prior to 1973. Because one of the things that has struck me, and as an observationalist, if you will, I don't even know if that's a word, but nonetheless,
Sounds like
is that I'm not surprised the way things are going right now, because as long as men are in charge, women, and I have 4 sisters and a mother, women will be treated as even less than second-class citizens in this country in particular.
hmm
Now, it is changing in other parts of the world. That is true. But it is a rather disheartening situation that exists where, as a friend of mine often says when he and I get into conversations about things like this, he says, why can't we, like Rodney King said, why can't we all just get along? Why? And I just find it so perplexing. Matter of fact, I wrote a book. I'll just briefly share with you that my book is called Choices, 5 Steps for Life. Now, think about, go back to your childhood. Go back to a time when you consciously made a decision to do something. Okay? You don't have to tell me. I can do the same. I'll go back to my childhood and I will think of a decision that I made consciously. Those decisions, the one you have chosen and the one that I have chosen, have brought us right here where we are. It's like the dominoes falling, right? What is it? Rube Goldberg, is that his name? Those machines,
the contraptions.
the
Yeah.
contraptions that people build.
Yeah.
That's exactly what's happening, and it continues to happen.
Absolutely.
And there is no way to stop it
With
unless
branches at each stage too.
exactly. Greg Braden, who's been on this program, talks about, he uses the term the 0 point, which is also called the choice point. And we reach those, the same as you just described from the Rube Goldberg devices. And we are there again. We are there again. And we hear people saying things on both sides of the aisle, since your book is fiction about our republic and what's happening. That there are those who are just flabbergasted that nothing's being done. There are certain terms that are being used to describe this person who's making these decisions, and we got to stop this. But nobody is doing anything. Yes, we had 8 million people for the No Kings protest. What did
Hmm.
that change? I haven't seen anything change yet.
No,
Yeah,
we could argue it's getting worse, but
we launched Artemis, and those four people have gotten away from this. And it's like, could I stow away, but drop me off at the moon? I'll parachute down, assuming that
yeah.
that'll work. In your estimation, and I want to go to this level. I want to go down deeper here. I want to ask you a question in regards not only to your book, but your observations, especially and obviously politically, specifically politically, but maybe broaden that out to some of the other arenas, economics, religion, social issues, and so forth. What is your feeling today about the current state of the soul of America? And where do you think that resides?
John Meacham is a big fan of that phrase too, by the way. He often refers to, he's a professor at Vanderbilt, and he often talks about, he actually wrote for both Republican and Democratic presidents.
Hmm.
And he often refers to that. He often refers to, how could, so I think one of the phrases would be, well, how can the same country that voted for Barack Obama twice then turn around in the next electoral season and then vote for that? And the reality is, look, it's part of the great experiment, which is people are coming from different perspectives, different cultures, different, and they all have different motivations. I think, everyone always says, well, it's the economy, stupid, right? So, and sure, that played a role, but there's much more tribalism going on, and it's being stoked by technology. And this, the case just came back with the influence of social media, but everyone knows that you don't need a court case to tell you that people are being influenced by their phone, scrolling up and down, and only getting the things that support their predisposition for those set of beliefs. If you're angry and you're angry at the economy, it's going to feed you stuff that makes you angrier because
Hmm.
that's their business model.
Yeah.
And in the novel in particular, I do try to come at it from all of those different angles because the economy is a big part of it, because there is threats to everyone's lifestyle coming right out. AI is people are afraid, right? I grew up. Both my parents were on those exact programs that the Republicans have been trying to kill for decades. And had it not been for subsidies from my family, I would not have probably grown up in the same. I grew up in a very blue collar town in Queens, New York, and we had a great work ethic. But I certainly didn't grow up the way my kids are growing up, right? And so when you grow up with looking at the world from that perspective, you see, you feel the exposure, you feel the weakness, you feel uh, the powerlessness, as you were referring to before, um, and what can be done to you when you are powerless like that. And that's a big driving motivation for a lot of the characters, because I repeat over and over how powerless they are.
Hmm.
In a place where, if we're going to keep dividing ourselves, if we're going to keep saying, we're only going to help the Democrats and not the Republicans, or vice versa, and that has appeared on both sides. To be fair, favoritism, has shown up in Democratic policies, but not like the way it's happening here. When you send only uh, ICE to Democratic states, to blue state, to as payback, or the
Hmm.
things that he aims at California just because he has a personal beef with Newsom. Um, that splits the country, and the novel talks about that, because the one of the phrases that's used is, well, you can't have a civil war, right? Even Texas has 40% is 40% blue, right? Or at times they've even thought they can flip it for some elections. Well, that physical barrier is an issue when it comes to the idea of a civil war. Um, but the war is culture. It's absolutely within us, not, it's the way we perceive what's going on. And with, the technology predisposing us to just seeing our team win, and uh, not thinking about what's happening, not thinking further about the implications of the decisions that are made, like going into Iran. Um, I can't imagine technology making it better. Right? And I certainly don't say it's going to make it any better, because what it's going to make it easier is for people empowered to abuse that technology for their own purposes, just like it's happening now. To what degree, how many people are being influenced by bots that aren't even American citizens, but they think it's a real person, and they're being influenced on Facebook or whatnot because that's technology being used. Musk taking over X, that's huge. He's completely changed the algorithm. They actually showed the examples of him twisting the algorithm almost real time because he was unhappy with, real time. He was looking at his phone. He didn't like the outcome, and so he called someone up and he had them twist it so that his posts got moved up higher up the ladder. The concentration of power in small groups in cabals is what's enabled by these groups are empowered because it's all being concentrated in a small group, and they're generally on the wealthy side, right? So that's exactly what's happening with all of the with the decisions being made. I mean, look, everyone's outright bribing the administration. That's the thing. We've given away chip technology because he got a plane from Qatar. The concentration of power that has been enabled in one person and his favored people, it's frightening. And I honestly, for an outlook into, I'm already starting to think about what to do with the next book and what year to place that. I can't even imagine what it could look like in a 2066, for example, where the technology is just getting better, right? So
Yeah.
you can tweak, you could tweak Grok to say racist things and call itself Mecha Hitler. What do you do when you can't control that anymore? Right now we can, but it's just, I noted on your website the discussion about living in the present, not living in the past.
Mm-hmm.
Allowing that, it's very. I'm sure it's part of a mindfulness practice or some aspect of trying to limit the emotional response and live more with a factual and present day response as opposed to the emotions of what happened to you in the past and things like that. I don't know how we can break people of that because that past is what is getting tweaked by the algorithms, by the bots, by the AI, and things like that. I don't know how we can disassociate because unfortunately it's the part of the human psyche that they're most taking advantage of and they are most aiming at, and they're just getting better at it. And I know some countries are taking away the phones from kids and everything, but it works on the adults pretty well too,
Yeah.
unfortunately.
I've used this analogy when it comes to events that I happen to see, whether it was on television back, let's just say 2001, or today. And I would say, okay, you want to argue these points, then this is going to be my position. And again, this is just an analogy. I'm not saying I believe this. I'm just saying I got a phone call at 5:45 a.m. on September the 11th, 2001. Says, you need to turn on the TV and see what's going on. I said, well, what's going on? He said, turn on the TV. So I turned on the TV, turned it into the news station. I kid you not, the first thought that went through my head was, wow, they've really perfected CGI. This is
Hmm.
incredible.
Yeah.
It's to the point today, the way people think, some people think, I'll say, you're talking about this quote unquote war that we're in with Iran. I don't believe it's real. I'm not there. And unless I see it with my own eyes, not through the screens, but
Right.
unless I am physically there, 9/11 didn't happen. Am I saying the Holocaust didn't happen? I don't know. I wasn't there. I don't know if 9/11 happened. I don't
Right.
even know if we're at war. Now,
Yep.
am I paying higher gas prices? I can see. I see it in up on the
Right.
sign. I see it as it's clicking away on the pump. Okay? But I don't even think about it. It's like you either pay it or don't. Don't complain because complaining isn't going to change anything. So,
Because we used to have trusted sources.
yeah. Well,
And we
see,
don't.
that's the other thing too is you get criticism on both sides about whatever sources you might be investigating. My wife and I, in the process of our move, almost a year ago. We were nearly scammed 3 times using internet resources that we thought were trusted, to the point now where I won't do business with anybody that solicits me via email or text. I have to know them or have been referred by someone I know.
Yep.
I have known, have met in person, in the station, on the street, in my home, etc., etc. It's basically going back to this funny but ironic phrase. Abraham Lincoln is quoted as saying, Jim, never trust anything you read on the internet. Abraham Lincoln said that.
I remember that.
I do too. It's carved right underneath one of the statues, one of the carved in the stone monuments there at what the heck is the name of that place? Why can't I think of it now? I just had it, where you have those giant heads. Mount Rushmore. It's carved at the bottom of Mount Rushmore. Mount Rushmore. That's where it is. Anyway,
Yep.
I'm being facetious, of course, but that's where we are today. That's literally where we are today, where people are believing. For example, my wife, she'll be on Facebook and she'll get a notification that Willie Nelson just died. Barack Obama just died. Oprah Winfrey just died. And then I do a check. No, none of these people are dead.
Yep.
Okay, I don't know how you got locked into an algorithm that is now feeding you this information, but
Yep.
it's wrong. So we are in a space in time where, you talk about AI and you talk about information, and I just don't know what we're going to do about this, because it is so pervasive in our culture, not just here in the United States, but around the world. And for all I know, Jim, now I have been on a cruise with my first wife down to the Mexican Riviera. So I do know that Cabo San Lucas, Puerto Vallarta, and there was, I can't remember, there's another third community where you go into port.
Puerto Vallarta.
Thank you. I know they exist because I've been there. My present wife and I, we've been to Ireland twice. We flew over the continent, across the Atlantic, and we landed in Heathrow, then took a jumper over to Ireland. I've been to Ireland, so I know that much exists. Beyond that, I don't know. I don't know if Iran even exists, or China, or India, or Australia, or the earth could be flat for all I know, because the information
there was a basketball player that said that recently.
What's that?
There was a basketball player that believed it was probably 5-10 years ago, but that the earth was flat. He was going around telling his followers that the earth was flat.
Well, I think that's part of where we have our real disconnect. I'll share this real quickly here. My brother and I, he's about 2 years younger than I, and I'm 65. We had a conversation following my sister's memorial a couple 3 years ago. Now, when it started, I kind of knew where we were both coming from, opposite ends of the political spectrum. And I said to myself, it doesn't matter how this ends. He is my brother. He will always be my brother. I will always love and be proud of him. And there will be no estrangement. None of this matters. Now, the interesting thing, when we got to the end of the conversation, he and I agreed, based upon what we knew, there were 3 challenges that we both agreed upon. Not how to meet them, but those 3 challenges. I don't even remember what they were right now. And it's like, what is wrong with people who are dividing families and relationships and so forth? My brother and I may be on opposite ends, but we're still siblings. We have the same parents and sisters and so forth. And even in that conversation, So that's one of the things that is so perplexing to me is how we've come so far. Jim Chesterton is my guest, and his book is Ashes of the Republic. As we continue here on Tell Me Your Story. When you were writing this book, was the title kind of there in the forefront, or maybe in the back of your mind, or were you just were focused on getting the story out on paper?
So it's actually one of the last things that got changed. So it was originally called, it was originally The World on Her Shoulders. It's actually a short story that I wrote. That was my first tinkering with getting back to being a little bit creative was writing a short story. And it was loosely based, well, it was essentially Ayn Rand's Atlas Shrugged. What would they do today? So if you're familiar with Ayn Rand, she is
Hmm.
often quoted, even though she was just an author, she was not she would refer to herself as a philosopher. But she has been quoted by many of the Republican, including Paul Ryan, not long ago. And in fact, the Pope chimed in because he sort of scolded Paul, who was a Catholic, for referring to Ayn Rand, because Ayn Rand's philosophy is essentially it's pure capitalism, right? So it's undistilled, no safety net, no. And when you read it, it's very logical perspective where it's, well, if I spend this much time working at something, and I am unique in that in the market, and her main character is an architect. If I do this well, then I deserve all the money that I get. And why should my money go towards those who don't do the things I do? And uh, when you first read it, and it was often pushed in high schools because it was meant to be sort of a model of pure capitalism, which is what the far right also wants to implement aside from religious principles. Um, but it forgets that not everyone has the ability, right? My parents did not have the ability to do. They were effectively shut-ins. My father was physically disabled. My mother was mentally disabled. The book doesn't care anything. Ayn Rand does not even consider them. Basically, her perspective was, you're not taking my money to help those two poor people in Queens, New York.
Mm.
And when you get older, you realize, okay, so as a principal, sure, do I earn the money? Do I deserve the money that I get? Because I worked at it and I did all of the things necessary to put myself in a position to make that and create a product that I can offer that gets me confident. Sure, no one's going to argue that. But like many of these things, it is an idea that is taken too far. Right? And going back to what you were saying before about you and your brother not necessarily agreeing, we often agree on the idea, right? No, there are a few people that are going to say that the border was in good shape 4 years ago, right? People agree that you need to maintain borders, that you have them for a reason, and that they should be that you just don't open them up and let everyone in. There are those that believe that, but for the most part, both left and right will agree that there does need to be some control of the border. That principle is no one will, if we all agree that, both left and right, then we can come up with a reasonable solution. But the reasonable solution is not setting a bunch of mass guys all over Minnesota, taking people and throwing them on planes to countries they don't even come from. Um, so the ideas we often agree on. Abortion. The country is very united on the ideas of abortion. It is quite united on. I think the polls generally have it that a woman's right to choose is between on both sides 70, 80, 90%. Um, and we can agree on that, and then but then those get distorted, and policy does not reflect what people agree, because at the end of the day, we if we all voted our own interest, economic in particular, uh, uh, Republicans often wouldn't win any election because our economic interests are not being met by this administration. If I am a voter for this administration, there is nothing in what do they call it, the big beautiful bill. There's nothing there that helps me. Matter of fact, because it's taking tax money away, there's little there that helps the working person. And
Yeah.
to your point about we they need to continue to divide. It's just the game plan. It's been the game plan. They decided this in the 60s and 70s, and places like the Heritage Foundation. My biggest concern is not this administration. they were given a game plan called Project 25 from the Heritage Foundation. And the Heritage Foundation is a think tank full of really smart people trying to figure out how to maintain the wealth of the people that pay their salary. The Koch brothers, things like organizations like that.
Yeah.
And they are very much thinking, I promise you, they're thinking way ahead than much further than I did with much smarter people than me about how do they maintain their power? How do they maintain their wealth over the next 20, 40 years as these jobs go away? I promise you they're going to do a better job of predicting it than I am. And I guarantee you it is not going to be in the best interest unless you're in the top 10% in wealth.
Yeah. Well, it's interesting the perspective that you have. I'm happy to have you here on the program because I'll put it this way. Years ago, I was working, and I worked for 15 years for a Christian radio station back in the 80s and early 90s in the heyday of televangelism, and of course during the Reagan administration. And I fell out of, I didn't vote for the guy, but I fell out of any kind of favor with him when he deregulated certain portions of the Federal Communications Commission back then. And one of them that I believe has contributed to where we are today. It's not the only thing. It may have taken longer had this not been eliminated. He eliminated what is called the fairness doctrine. And I'm sure you're probably familiar. I've even asked some people who are staunch current administration supporters. I said, what do you think about reinstituting the fairness doctrine? So, well, what is that? Most of them don't know. They're too young. So I explain it to them. And they wholeheartedly agree that the fairness doctrine should be reinstituted because it's not telling the broadcaster what they can and cannot talk about. It's saying if you are going to talk about something, you have to talk about it from as many perspectives as you can. And that's the goal of this program. Tell me your story. There is a circle made up of points, and there's an event that is going on in the middle of this circle. And I ask people to step onto one of those points, observe, take note, and move to the next point on the circle, and move around the circle as far as you can. Not everybody's going to get all the way around all 360 degrees, but the more points that you stand on and look into that event, the better understanding you're going to have of what's going on there. I really find it fascinating about the way that this whole concept of misinformation, disinformation, propaganda. One of the things that has struck me, Jim, is the allegations and accusations made by people on one side, especially when it comes to quote unquote the programming slash propaganda slash indoctrination by the educational system. And then they talk about their educational system that they want to institute. And I'm going, and what's the difference between your programming, indoctrination, and propaganda? It's the same thing, only it's coming from your perspective. When we celebrated the 500th anniversary of the sailing of Christopher Columbus in 1492, and this was in 1992, I remember what I was taught in school. It was one story. But in 1992, I got 3 different versions. He was a saint, somewhere in the middle, and the devil.
Yep.
And I figured I'm going to kind of stick with more closer to the middle. That's probably more accurate because none of us human beings is perfect.
Well, complex. It's complex. The answer to his question, the answer to your question. But nobody wants you to think that way. They just want the simplistic answer because it's just easier and get me back to whatever my day-to-day is. But complexity is there, and the goal is to make it easy. They don't want you thinking too much about it because if you think too much about it, you might not do what they want you to do. And that's the way the algorithm is set up. It's, oh no, it's simple. He's the devil. He was also an explorer that came across an ocean that could not be imagined. Performing, even though uh, the travel aspects alone, forget the navigation, forget all the things that it took to do that. It's complex, and they even say this with revisionist sort of a revisionist history about, well, our leadership in the country, but they were complex people too, and you're a complex person. I'm a complex person. They don't want you to think that way. They just want you to believe the spoon-fed version because it's simple and it's easy to swallow.
Well, I'll tell you, it's one of those perplexing things. As you say, it's complicated. It is. It is very complicated. And we're all just trying to make sense of it all. And part of the frustration is that, we keep being told so many different things from so many different
Yep,
perspectives.
yep,
There are those who, I've had conversations with folks, especially about the current administration and its first term. And I said, you don't seem to understand where I'm coming from. On the 15th of June, 2015, even before I even knew what the platform of this individual was, I didn't want him there in the position that he has now gotten for a second term. Had nothing to do with politics. It goes back to Martin Luther King's statement about judging someone not by the color of their skin, be it black, white, or orange, and judging them by the content of their character. Sorry, Brad. Sorry about that. But it's like I even asked business leaders, this guy that you probably voted for, if he were an employee of yours, how long would you keep him on the payroll before you got rid of him because he was a disruptive influence? Oh, probably right away. Then why is
no
he
company would
sitting?
do this. Yeah,
What's that?
no, no. For a country that is as capitalist as it often says, well, the market solves everything. No corporation would run like this. It would go bankrupt.
Yeah.
And in many ways we are going bankrupt because depravity of statements like I'm going to wipe out an entire civilization, that forget everything else, the inhumanity of it, and by the way, incidentally, the lack of Christian values in that statement alone, just that one statement.
Yeah. Now, I want to ask you about this aspect, not specifically that statement, but my perspective that words have power.
Yep.
Now, I have been accused of being naive and idealistic when it comes to what politicians say on the campaign trail, let alone once they have been elected.
Right.
And I say, well, what you don't understand is the words that we use, the ones I'm using now, the ones you're using now, we have a particular intent here.
Yep.
I'm not necessarily trying to convince anybody of anything. I'm just wanting to share what you're talking about, and that's your book, which is Ashes of the Republic, which is a science fiction, if you will, science fiction novel. And you used the words you used in your book for a reason. And sometimes when you went through to edit it, and you may have changed some words. Let me grab my thesaurus and let me
Quite a
look.
few. Yeah.
Yeah. By the way, I have a sidebar question. What's another name for thesaurus?
Oh,
But words have,
English teacher joke.
yeah. Talk to me about your perspective in regards to words having power and these people in positions of leadership and so forth, to the extent, and I'll go this far, I don't believe, I don't care what is said. I don't believe a word of what's being said because it's
Hmm.
been laid out too many times over and over and over again
Yep.
that the fact checkers have found that no, it's not true. So talk to us about your perspective on words having power.
And it's about what's considered acceptable by think of the things that were considered unacceptable certainly, but because it all the book keeps coming back to the hierarchy, the hierarchy. If you let things happen here, it does. Does it mean that an 8-year-old hearing him say those things is going to go out and do horrible things? No, but every culture every culture, full stop,
Hmm.
has a morality of what's acceptable and not acceptable. The idea that a president of the United States would say that he likes people who don't get captured, talking about John McCain. The idea
Mm.
of talking about a captured Vietnam War hero who was in the Hanoi Hilton, talking about him in that way, talking about he doesn't understand why soldiers sign up. That was, think about how long ago he said that, and he got reelected, right? The words that the word choice, and this is and it's funny because he's now getting it from the Wall Street Journal, right? Now, the reason the economy was fine during the first term, for the most part, COVID, COVID aside, but they don't care about the people at the Wall Street Journal are reading the Wall Street Journal because it's the Wall Street Journal and they need as much objective information as they can. And they're calling them out because it affects markets. It affects people's bottom line. It affects their money. And for that, they're not going to put up with it. They'll put up with it at Fox News because that's an emotional play that they're doing to get your vote. That's
Hmm.
to maintain power. But mess with my money, I'm going to start telling you the truth. And they have been talking a lot of truth about the Epstein files. They're the ones who raised the Epstein files. This is Rupert Murdoch's Wall Street Journal brought up the Epstein files. So think about the words they're using and how they're trying to correct, at least for the business world, and sort of level set on what the lies are causing by telling the truth. They're trying to at least level set on, no, these are facts, right? The Strait of Hormuz is closed. You can say it's open all you want. It's closed. Why do we care? Because our oil is going through the roof. And it's about what is a society willing to accept as acceptable behavior.
Hmm.
And
Hmm.
and that is expressed through words. And unfortunately, words are not his strong suit. But it does trickle down. You see people's the discourse. I look. I'm from Queens. F word was ubiquitous, and I grew up, but it seems to be everywhere now. Like you even see it referred to. It's on. It's bleeped out on CBS or whatever, but it's still being used. And I just feel like, to me, it was always supposed to be salt. You sprinkle it on every now and then and add a little flavor,
Yeah.
but you don't
Yeah.
eat salt. And I just feel like it's everywhere. And now, and look, I think this was a bunch of things. I think, this generation, and look, my kids swear too, right? But it seems like the level of discourse has just degraded to the point, and I think like COVID had a lot to do with it, but the social media certainly has a lot to do with it. And sure, do we want to be as formal as as formal as we are with the language? There's a lot of informality that has sort of, look at the way people dress at work now. Nobody wears few or companies wear suits anymore. They go more casual. A lot of the formality has gone away because we recognize a lot of it. What does a tie really serve? It doesn't serve a purpose, right?
Hmm.
So the informality in some ways, it's good, right? So we've loosened up a little bit about things that really didn't matter. But the level of discourse has gotten so coarse at times, that people feel like, well, it's my freedom. I can say whatever I want. And to your point earlier about yelling fire, and sure, there's no rules, but there are societal rules. And I think that has, particularly the politicians. I'm not blaming the politicians; they're all doing it. But by the way, they are on the left now. They just had an article about how now the Democrats are starting to use those words all the time too. Because here's the mistake that people made. People felt, politicians are used to saying, but they're very polished in their language. And for people who may not share that language and share that the formality of their language, they feel like they're putting on airs and everything like that. And that's why the gentleman in power now does, because they feel he believes what he says, right? They feel like what is coming out of his mouth is truth to him, and he's
Hmm.
not being a phony. At least he's saying the quiet part out loud, and they give him credit for being honest for that. Now, he uses that to instruct, but he does speak more frankly than anyone ever has, and
Sure.
certainly anyone has ever gone to the power. And you're starting to see that. So John Fetterman on the left is similar in his approach to language, and he I believe is in a Republican district, but he's a Democrat. Well, he's a senator from Pennsylvania, and he gets a lot of the blue collar folk because they believe he believes what he's saying. The problem is Trump does believe some of the things he's saying, and some of the things he's saying are completely insane.
Yeah.
Um, and so to your point about language is a tool, right? And it is interlaced. Why did I choose certain words versus another? Because I didn't. In some cases, I thought somebody might be offended by a particular word, and I don't want to offend my reader. But it's all about emotion, and and when they use things like this, it's to appeal to a base. When you say things like "I'm going to wipe out," well, that's the manosphere. That's just look at it's this. Oh, if I can beat a policy of if I can dominate someone, then I'm the better than them, and it's appealing to the most base levels of our humanity. Frankly, it's appealing to a caveman mentality of as long as I dominate, then I'm the winner and I'm better, even when he's obviously not the winner here. I mean, we're gonna pay for these sins for many years to come with what's going on over there. So what you say is exactly right about the language, and it trickles down. So people at all levels feel, well, he does it, so I can say that even if it's not necessarily that bad, it frees people up to say even the worst things and even things that they don't necessarily agree with.
I have a 4-step process I went through in January 2017 following the 16 election. Because I got sucked in to the political thing in early September of the year before. And it was like my intuition, my inner voice was saying, look, you have got to move away from this stuff or it will kill you. So the first step was, and the interesting thing was my inner voice was saying, and you have to say this first one out loud. You have to hear it in your ears, not in your head. And that is, thank you, teacher. And that word stuck in my craw for a while because I didn't want to give him that title. But the reality is, thank you, teacher, for teaching me how not to be. The second the statement of a step was, I forgive you, but more importantly, I forgive myself for allowing myself to be dragged into this quagmire. And of course, that makes me think of giggity, but that's another thing. Third thing that I came up with was a question. What is it that you're so afraid of that makes you be this way? I'm not asking you to change. Oh, no, We make choices. That's how we choose to live. That's up to you. I want to understand. That's all. So that I can put all of you and this behind me and move on with my life. Then one of my guests said, you forgot a 4th step. I said, really? Yeah. The first 3 are great. But now you have to say to this person or situation, I love you. You have every right to be here. I don't have to like you or what you're doing or saying, but I have to give you the right to exist in this world and play out your role, as Shakespeare said, all the world's a stage. We're all but, players. And I have to let you play your role, and I will play mine.
Yep.
Without you living rent free in my head.
Yep.
Do you think, from your perspective, aside from your novel, which, folks, I'll remind you of the title, it is Ashes of the Republic, which is available, by the way, at jameschesterton.com, and we will be linked to that as well. Are you optimistic based upon what you know and you've experienced specifically about the political arena, that circle that surrounds that arena?
Yeah.
Are you optimistic, or have we run our course and 250 years, we'll be lucky to make it to 255?
I am. I'm pretty sure it was Churchill that said America will always do the right thing if once it's exhausted all the other options, right? Um, the the problem with our system, all right? So there are systems that are designed not to swing this much because they vote for the representatives who vote for the president. Um, we do it the other way around. We vote for everyone individually, and we vote for the president. And so that creates this pendulum, right? I do think so. One of the things, I have a friend in Australia, and he's like, "What are you doing over there?" And my response to him was, one of the folks like Ben Shapiro, there are a lot of folks on the right who are perfectly reasonable. Even the Megyn Kellys of the world are turning around and say, "Hey, we shouldn't be in this war," right? So they are starting to speak up, and that's starting to happen. Not so much from the politicians, because at the end of the day, they recognize that he can end their term, but uh, it's swinging back, but it needs to swing back from the right. The simple reality is, I would have voted for Chris Christie or John Sununu out of New Hampshire, who's the governor of New Hampshire. Very reasonable, good old-fashioned Republicans that actually behave like Republicans. Uh, Easily, I would have voted for them. Not, I'm in Connecticut. Look, I was going to vote for whoever the Democratic candidate was, but uh, I do think so. What I told my friend in Australia was, is I said, look, he's unchained now. He's basically had the Supreme Court tell him he can do whatever he wants. And guess what? He's going to do whatever he wants. And lo and behold, he's doing whatever he wants. And now people are starting to see. Now they're starting to see. So the things that I worried about in 2022 when I first started writing it, again, those aren't about him. He's not a character. It's a fictional novel, but it's about the power behind him that comes from the far right. And this is not a criticism of Christianity. It is not a criticism of Republicans. Like I said, I'd probably be a Republican in 1986. This is a reaction to, and what's happening now is, just like I'm reacting to it, you're starting to see the politicians react to it a little bit more. More importantly, the influencers, right? So the folks that have, Rogan's talking about the things that he doesn't like saying, including the Minneapolis stuff. And what I tell my friend is, he's going to do his worst, and it's gonna bring us back to, hopefully not a swing back all the way to the left, hopefully something in the middle that sticks. And the reality is, I saw this. I forget who it was, and they said, "Can he? Isn't someone else? Isn't JD Vance just going to take over and just do the same thing?" This man is a unique phenomenon, and there's no way to call it. It makes perfect sense that he comes from New York City, the home of capitalism, the center of the American financial might, and capitalism in particular is pure undistilled capitalism. Me first, me only,
Hmm.
and I will vanquish anyone who comes between me and what I want as a capitalist. That is, that is something that we as a society need to deal with as we start facing challenges around AI and how we're going to distribute our wealth. Uh, and I'm hopeful that uh, with the personality out of the way, that the adults can start taking over again. On from both sides, we need a strong right, not a far right. We need a strong right,
Hmm.
and we need the intellectuals, the George Wills, the Chris Christies, we need them to be the reasonable counterpart, as opposed to what others will do for votes, which is just aim at that monkey brain that just reacts and reacts and reacts and gives us what we have now.
Yeah. Well, there's no question it is, on one level, a very complicated situation. At the same time, we've been through some trying times over the last 2.5 centuries, and we're
Hmm.
still here. Uh,
Bombs are
I
going off in the 60s, right?
Yeah,
They to protest the Vietnam War, bombs were going off.
yeah, exactly,
I'm not
exactly
suggesting
right.
that as a solution for today, but
Yeah.
you,
What
you
what
know,
is so fa Go ahead, please.
no, go ahead. That's all I was saying.
I was going to say it is interesting too. This was an observation made by someone I was watching who said, "What is so fascinating about the present day and what we're doing right now, as far as this conflict, because it is an undeclared war, which I don't quite understand how it is that military people are actually agreeing to go and do their thing when this is an illegal situation." And you remember that thing that was put out that one of the, that what was it, Kelly, nearly was attacked by the administration for putting that out because
Yep.
supposedly it was treasonous about how you do not have
Yeah.
to
Mark Kelly. Yep.
follow unlawful commands or orders.
Yep.
Well, how is it that it's not an unlawful order to be told to go fight something that is illegal? I haven't been able to figure that one out, but that's
It,
whole nother
everyone's
conversation.
slipping through what was, and in fairness, Bush did it. That there is
True.
no
That
clear
is true.
definition of what a military, what an
Yeah.
action is versus a war. But of course, it's obvious. It's perfectly obvious this is a war, and that's it. But it's in fairness, it's Congress. Congress is the one that needs to fix. They make the laws,
Yeah.
and right
Uh,
until then, every president is going to skip and slide in between the
yeah.
verbiage just
It-
to get to do what they
yeah.
want.
But it's fascinating that the comment was made that every time we do this, i.e., we go battle the Middle East in particular,
Mhm.
we spent 10 years in Afghanistan. What do
Yep.
we have to show for it other than the dead?
Yep.
We went into Kuwait in 92, 93. I can't remember the exact year.
I think 92.
And we went back again.
Mhm.
And we keep going back and we keep going back and we keep going back. They say, well, of course, this all started in 1979. No, 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 no. This started long before. Again, it's the going back to the choices and the dominoes. This has been going on for centuries. This is nothing new. And yet
And with sorry.
the reality is we look at history and we actually refuse to learn from it, don't
Mhm.
we?
But he ran on that. He ran on, look at all
I
the
know.
mistakes we made. I'll never do that. And here he is. And and you're starting to see they're starting to reveal what the discussion was internally, whether to go or not go. And look, there are arguments for doing it, but um, it, 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 it's just what I look forward to history revealing. We know what the motivation was for Iraq. We know what the motivation was. Where is the motivation here? Because there's so many places it could be coming from, and because it is who it is, it's impossible to predict what the motivation was.
What I can't figure out, though, is why so many people who have the power to stop these kinds of things, not just this,
Yeah,
where are they? What is it that what does he have on them that they're so afraid
he left them out
to
of the room.
do the right thing?
In the first administration, he let him in the room, and McMaster would talk about how he was able to control him. Mattis, James Mattis, they all spoke about how they were able to keep him in check. Supreme Court said he could do it. The Supreme Court ultimately said your president can't be, and now that's up to interpretation. He's certainly testing the boundaries of it, and
Yeah.
they have, in fairness, they have checked him. They checked him on tariffs. Maybe it'll continue, and it sounds like they'll do the same on the birthright citizenship. But the reality is, and again, I'm not just shilling for the book. That's what the book's about. It's
Right.
about what happens if what happened. My town voted mostly Republican in the last election. Well, what if that mentality trickles down? I'm only gonna help them. Then, well, the fire department I know for a fact is more on the right than it is on the left. What if they suddenly decide, Huck's house is on fire, this guy's house is on fire? What if I take a little extra time to get to that fire? Like that's if the mentality is that I, as public servant, am going to decide which citizens I help, we are all powerless. And that
Yeah.
should scare everybody,
Yeah.
not just someone on the left
Yeah.
or someone on the right.
It brought to mind a lyrics from a song by Harry Chapin about America. And that very thing happened in that song where the fire department, they were watching dirty movies in the back of the
Hmm.
firehouse and everything, and the bell goes off, and they don't want to stop now. They were going to finish this movie. Let it burn. It's just an old tenement house, a bunch of homeless people and so
Wow,
forth.
I
And
never heard the song. Yeah.
oh, I wish I could remember the exact title of it, but it has to do. Maybe you can Google the lyrics. Whatever happened to America, and it's a long song, almost along the lines of
Wow.
Taxi and sequel.
Right.
Uh, but I find it interesting too, from a musical standpoint, that a lot of the songs from the '60s and the '70s and even into the '80s, well, we called them the protest songs, are just as relevant today And then, of
And
course, there
he's
are a
doing
lot
it
of
today.
people writing their own today as well. Um, what about the people, the citizens of this country? What is your observation of their now? First of all, they elected this guy plus all of the other people in Congress and the Senate.
Hmm.
And George Carlin, he basically says, you know what? I don't complain about the politicians because it's not the politicians' fault. It's the public. It's the
Mm.
voters. It's their fault that you might be in the situation that you're in. That's where he's coming from.
You
And
know, sorry.
go ahead. And I'd love your observations on that.
It used to be that it's a representative democracy. Arguably, it's not a democracy; it's a republic. And I'm not a poli sci guy, but it's supposed to be representative government, which says I don't know all the facts. I'm sending you to Congress to act in my best interest. You get all the facts, and you represent my best interest as a representative of the state of Connecticut, New York, wherever, and that they make their decisions based upon their morality. And in a perfect world, uh, the representative is consistent with the morality and the decisions and the policy preferences of its constituency.
Hmm.
It's backwards now. They are changing they're making their policy to get the votes. So if you go to a state that, or go to a county, go to a district that has been greatly impacted by, yeah, economically, and it is much easier to just create policy that reflects their anger. So instead of challenging that anger and saying, well, it's a lot of people involved with the economy and it's not just the Democrats or Republicans. Instead, they're making their policy to reflect at times conspiracy theories. Marjorie Taylor Greene, space lasers and things like that. Those are based on conspiracy theories that her constituency knew, and so she was feeding that to them. And you know what? She just quit over feeling that her decisions were wrong, right? So that her, uh, for all intents and purposes, we'll have, if we take her at her word now, she's realizing that was a mistake. But again, because we have so many levers to press, so people in power have levers to press with things like Fox News and all of the myriad sources of disinformation that are out there. Um, to stay in power, they will maneuver themselves however they please. And as long as a politician is willing to change their principles and their morality, stay in power, the people are. So, in a sense, Carlin's right, but it was always the purpose for the politician to come back to the people and say, well, I hear what you're saying, but, and they'd be willing to challenge their constituency based on the knowledge that they have, so that, look, they're the ones that sit in the meeting and get the briefing, so they know all of many of the reasons for action XYZ. They come back and they say, well, I understand why you feel like that, but, and they're willing to stand by their decision because they know it's the right thing to do, because they're the ones with the information, not Joe Q, who is
Hmm.
too busy living their life. That's what, see, for me, it's what comes back to. You can't blame the citizens for things they don't know about. And if they were just duped, they were just duped. And obviously they're being duped. Obviously we're all being duped.
Yeah.
And to what degree we're going to pay for it, I don't know. I know a lot of people are going to pay hard for this. I worry so much about what's going to happen with the big beautiful bill when it starts impacting. And it's already closed hospitals in rural areas. It's
Mm.
it's as people can't afford insurance, and as they continue to drain tax money out of the system, things like Doge. The estimates on how many people are going to die from the Doge cuts alone, the inhumanity of it, just to save a buck and just to pay less in taxes, which is all it was. It
Hmm.
was basically a big tax giveaway. Um, I guess they can sleep at night. Um, I wouldn't be able to, but I make my decisions based on my morality, not the other way around. I don't let others tell me what my morality is just so I can stay in power.
Well, there was one interesting aspect of all of this that we've sort of touched upon a little bit. I asked at the front of the program about your observations of the soul of America and where you think it is and
Mm,
going. And I know that there are people who love to quote this phrase. They say that this country was founded on Judeo-Christian ethics and values.
mhm, sure.
Judeo-Christian didn't even exist when this country was founded. Number one, they were, if I'm, and again, I'm trying to remember all of this stuff. They were not Christians. They were, if I'm not mistaken, they were either deists or theists,
Yes,
one of the
sure.
two. But
Yeah.
when they came here in the 1600s, they all kind of split off into their own little tribes because
Hmm.
each tribe had its own perspective on what was right and wrong, what the values were. So there was no cohesion in that regard. Um, and the one thing that I have found so fascinating when I hear that phrase is the fact that, and maybe the work I was doing for those 15 years back in the 80s and early 90s was a great training ground for me in learning and understanding, was that I had hope for the future when it came to people of faith because it wasn't the ministers and the pastors, the hierarchy, basically what you talk about, of course, in your book. But what gave me hope was the fact that the people that I spoke with, we'll refer to them as the laity, whether they be Protestant or Catholic or otherwise, was that none of them believed exactly the same thing, which
Yeah.
was
Whose rules
wonderful.
should win, right? Yeah.
And it wasn't about, my way or the highway. It
Yeah.
was, this is what I believe. What do you believe? Oh, well, that's interesting. Why do you believe that? I'm curious. I'm interested. I don't have an agenda here to try to convert you. I'm just curious as to how you got there because maybe there's something there for me. And that's what gave me hope. So I'm holding out that same hope even from a political standpoint, let alone I'll call it a spiritual standpoint,
Right.
because this whole Christian nationalism has nothing to do with one's faith. It's absolutely devoid of faith.
Yep.
And then when I hear, because there was this fella on the streets of Santa Barbara where we used to live. He'd stand on the street corner where the art museum was, and he'd be handing out for free these DVDs that basically showed that they found Noah's Ark at the top of this mountain. Here, free DVD, and so forth. Well, I got to thinking about that and other things, and I said, wait a minute, wait a minute. I have a faith. Now, faith is not based in anything material. I can't prove to you, nor do I need to justify my
Yep.
faith, right? So, why is the alleged ark on that mountain going to make you either a believer, or B, more of a believer?
Yep.
Jesus even said in the New Testament, he says, that's great, you guys believe because you've seen. Blessed are those who have not seen and yet believe.
Believe. Yep.
So, getting back to the core of kind of what we're talking about in the context, of course, of your book, which is Ashes of the Republic. I almost said Ashes of the Empire.
Which struck back.
Yeah, really. Um, th- um, it seems to me that the sort of the solution is to get back, bring one's faith, one's morals, one's beliefs, and so forth back to themselves, back to their families, their homes, their families, their communities, which is what we talk about on this program constantly. It's all about community. Is that sort of, in a nutshell, what your storyline is sort of devoid of? Is that there is no real community in the book, let alone in the situation that we find ourselves in this country right now?
No, how it appears in the book is that uh, there has been an event, not dissimilar to your arc reference. There has an event that galvanized the American Christian right, and in many ways consolidated them. So now you have Pentecostals, you have many branches of Christianity that that basically used this event as a means of justifying their Christian nationalism. So this happened, and so subsequently we're going to take over the government, and we are going to force everyone to follow the rules of our. So there is a organization named the Guardian Angels, not the idea coming out of there was an organization in New York City. I think it still
Yeah.
exists. Um,
Sliwa. Yeah, I remember.
right, but it's effectively the religion police. No dissimilar, by the way. Iran has it too. They're the ones who partnered. So they partner with government to identify breaches of religious, uh, more religious slash moral. The skirt has to be below the knee. And so they enforce those and use the levers of government and policing and power to enforce that, basically to force people. And the novel is about people basically not choosing. They're being forced into or pay the price, right? So you either join our tribe or you will pay the price in ways that become apparent as
Mm.
the novel goes
Remind,
on.
yeah. Reminds me of The Handmaid's Tale, that story. There have been certainly a number of them. Even if you even want to go back to 1984 by George
Yeah,
Orwell,
yeah.
and it's, by the way, I found this fascinating when I was signing up for, what was it? I want to say, I think it was Audible through Amazon. And I read something that really struck me. Now, I haven't read the book. I've seen bits and pieces of the movie that it was made from, that it was made of. And I found out that the very first, no, it was Kindle. I beg your pardon, but I think that's still part of Amazon. The
Yeah.
very first book that Kindle banned, which shocked the daylights out of me. And I'll quickly why. I used to work back in 79. I got a job with a radio reading service for the blind and visually impaired. I also worked there, but I was also a client. I was legally blind at the time. And we would read newspapers, magazines, books, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, long before um, the popularity of recorded books, although it was really cool. So I have a deep affinity for the freedom to read whatever you want, regardless of your ability. If you can't see, then we need to make some forms available. The book that Kindle banned was Fahrenheit 451, the first book they banned. And I thought,
Where they must have been being ironic. I mean,
what an interesting irony.
you
Now,
can't burn
maybe
a Kindle, but
now I will have to research that to verify that that is actually true. Do some fact checking. But I remember reading that going, do they even know what is in the covers of that book on those pages?
yeah.
And it's one of the arguments I got into with my boss at the Christian station at the time, because back then they were trying to defund the publishing in Braille of Playboy. Now, from an economic standpoint, if Hefner wanted to make that available to the blind and visually impaired, the Braille
Mhm.
readers, okay, give them a subscription price.
Yeah.
But because it's already being paid for by the government and there are no pictures, all right, it's Braille, it's bumps on a page, right?
Right. Right.
So I told my boss, I says, now you're in favor of that. But now what you're doing is you're telling the blind community, the Braille readers specifically, what they can and cannot read.
Yep.
You get to walk into a library or a bookstore and you get to go up and down those aisles. And if you see a pink book, you don't want to, I don't want to read a book that covers pink, or you see certain words on the spine of the
Yeah.
book, and so on and so on and so on, whatever your criteria is, you get to do that. But the blind and visually impaired don't. And so what you are doing is you are telling them you will decide what they can and cannot read.
Yep.
And that is not the America that I know. And it does seem that that's what's happening in this country. It's been happening probably for the last 15, 20 years with, I don't know about burnings, but I know book bannings in public library, in the libraries, school libraries and so forth. And I don't know. Your thoughts in that regard to how
I,
far we're going to go? I mean, I've got hundreds and hundreds of books that I've gathered, and I gave away 1,000 or more when we moved from where we were living. And I gave them to a place that's going to hopefully. I gave them to actually I gave them to the Santa Barbara Planned Parenthood for their book sale. And some of
mhm.
the books were far right stuff. Okay, that
Yeah,
because again, I get all these books just like that.
they have a right. Yep.
Yeah. So what are you thinking in terms of maybe I should broaden it by saying the freedom of information or the freedom to access whatever information I want?
I think it's even more nefarious than that. I think they're trying to prevent the book from ever coming out. And think about it. You had even said earlier something about protest music, protest writing.
Hmm.
When I first thought, I remember when I first thought of the idea, and I went on to Amazon and I searched, and they're the industry refers to them as comps. What books are like your book? Um, and there's a couple, but there's not a lot, and there's not a lot of music either. Think about it. There's some artists that will throw out a song. John Moreland is one of my favorite. He's a blues musician. He has a couple of songs that touch on the subject of he's talking to his in the song. He's trying to tell his friends why he believes the man's a charlatan. Effectively, what and there are other there are very but and maybe they have a song, but there certainly is no Ohio out there. There's no Crosby, Stills, Nash and Young coming up with a true protest song that is vocal. And why is that? Well, it's corporate interest, right? But it's even. I'll take it one step. So, no, I think aside from what the FCC is doing, Colbert getting canceled, perfect example, right? I think so that is using the tools of what is supposed to be an objective organization, the FCC, and they're silencing it that way. But I think more importantly, they're trying to put pressure. Look, there's a little pressure on me not to release this book, right? It's not going to make some people happy on the far right. And because when you use things like thuggery, when you condone behaviors like when Nancy Pelosi's husband was attacked, saying that's a good thing. Going back to your point about language too, if we keep lowering the standards at the highest level, well, that just trickles down. And the simple reality is there are a lot of incentives for me not to do this book. I took up stand up, right? And when I took a class in the city, and they're like, yeah, you might not want to do political jokes because you know what, you're just going to piss off half your audience. Now in New York, that might not be true, right? And you
Hmm.
probably piss off 20% of your audience. But uh, it was sort of the club giving you a wink, wink, saying, "Stay away from the politics because I want people to come back because I want people to pay money, buy two drinks and listen to a comic for 30 minutes." There are most primarily financial incentives and some of the fear mongering as incentive to not write a book like this, to
Hmm.
not say the wrong thing, and to not write a song that could become an anthem for this generation. Oh, but I mean, people they go to the Academy Awards and they go to the Grammys and all that. Those songs have nothing to do with what's relevant, in today's world. They're often vapid, and you look at the musicians and the lyrics that came out in protest, and I just don't see it much. And
Yeah.
I'm not saying that was a motivation for me, but like I felt like it was a market that was untapped because, going back to my original idea, which was I want people. I think it's important, like to visualize what this looks like, to visualize what it's like to walk in your neighborhood and fear a group of people that were deputized by virtue of their party, effectively,
Mm.
by virtue of the fact that they agreed with the powers that be, and so therefore they're deputized to do whatever they want, and no power is going to check them because it's all corrupt from the bottom, from the head down.
Mm. Very interesting. One final question here before we wrap things up in regards to this conversation, and that is you talk about, you use the terms morals and values. I'm curious as to where you're coming from, how you were raised,
Mhm.
and where you are today, because obviously you're committed to what you do believe, from the standpoint of writing this book.
Mhm.
Because yes, it's fiction, but as we've already discussed, it's kind of happening right now. And I know my wife was a big fan of, for example, The Handmaid's Tale, the
Yep.
series, and I watched a couple, three episodes, and I got tired of it because I thought I don't care for the drama. I really,
Yeah.
it's like I get it. I get that this is happening. I understand. I have four sisters, three still living. I get all of that. But, my watching this isn't going to change a whole lot, for one. But we see these kinds of things happening, and I'm wondering if that's kind of where we're at we have the clash, so to speak, of your morals and values versus, let's just say, mine or anybody else's, and how you find yourself staying committed to self, staying committed to that inner guidance and so forth.
I was an old boy. I grew up a good Catholic. I went to the nice Polish church in Queens. And you would refer to Judeo-Christian values. I'd love it if we get back to that. What's going on now is not Judeo-Christian. So, I'm not a believer now, but I am a true believer in everyone's ability to have that. There was another title of the book, is The Pursuit of Happiness, and that's really what it's about. At the end of the day, a moral code needs to have empathy, to allow for everybody's ability or a pathway toward happiness. And that's why they tried to keep religion, or did keep religion, out of the Constitution, specifically because, like you said, the Pentecostals believe something different than the Baptists, who believes not. So even within Christianity, forget crossing over across religions, the reality is there is a lot of Judeo-Christian morality in our laws and in our, but that it's also true that many cultures have mandates against murder and mandates against property. I mean, it's not unique to Judeo-Christian. Many religions have this already,
Hmm.
but at the end of the day, we're human. We know what's right and what's wrong. And
Yeah.
and even though our perception of that changes over decades, and people's perception, it's people have we as a culture have made progress, and we've been ahead of much of the world on many things, right? And it's because of if the culture in China. I have a friend who was he was a principal. He's actually now a superintendent, and he was being called to bring his students to China. This is before COVID, and they wanted to do swaps because they wanted to get the creativity that American kids have, and see how they wanted to be able to teach and see what is it about American kids that have a level of creativity
Mm.
that they don't have in what is a collective society. A collectivist society like China, it's the society first, people second. We're the opposite. We had this crazy notion that men and women have the right to their own to write their own story, their own novel, for lack of a better phrase. But that's not the way it is, and they lack that creativity. My moral compass is I find every time I sit down, my neighbors, up until recently, he was a trooper, and they both voted for the current administration both times. But we still we talk about the same things, and it's because we still are Americans, and we still do come from a combined sense of what is right and wrong. We just have different solutions. They think
Mhm.
this was necessary, and I don't think they even agree with what's going on now. They moved, unfortunately, but um, I think we know. Look, there's a reason most people, the approval ratings are down. It's because even when we saw Americans dying, not that it's okay to shoot immigrants either,
Mhm.
but when they started seeing Americans dying at the hands of masked men representing the government, everyone's sort of inner trigger went off and went, no, that's a step too far. And I think the disapproval ratings on that are pretty high. That's why that's when things have gotten so far from the norms. And look, we can't, those norms are reflected in our literature. They're reflected in our movies. There are movies that are written you could not write today,
Yeah.
because our values have changed. There are movies, and I won't say them, but there are simply there are reflections of the morality of a time that are no longer reflective of that time, because we have progressed as a society and said, you know what, maybe we do still need to fix certain things, and maybe that isn't right the way we portray this group of people and whatnot. And it was progressing just fine until now. And now, because of that appeal towards that monkey brain, and that appeal towards just the worst instincts of a human being, the soul of the nation, perverting that often with the use of religion, Again, not the problem is not religion. It is the corruption of religion. How Christians can condone some of the behaviors that are going on today is beyond me. Right? Just his statements on Americans. Forget what he says about others, people in other countries. I won't even quote him because I know I'm sure it's a PG. But some of the things that he said about fellow Americans is disgusting. It's just disgusting, and to your point, we can't quantify it. It's best quantified through our laws, and it's best qualified through our policies, and it's best qualified through our actions as a nation. And at the state level, what things do certain states allow? Some states are very much cracking down on abortion, are very happy to arrest girls and women who have broken what they consider to be the law. And I'm not getting into what is what they're often religious interpretations, which is why I avoid them. I simply say there's a disagreement. And there used to be a time where politicians got together, like John McCain used to get together with, he had a partner in the left that he dealt with. Actually, I think it was, I won't waste your time trying to remember it, but they used to get together and say, okay, this is where we can agree. Let's go enact policy to do that. But it's not like that anymore. It has to be this. Otherwise, I don't get reelected because the man told me to fight. The man told me to go over and say foul things to rally the base.
Yeah. You make me think of
I hope we get
the
back to it.
speech that Jeff Daniels gave to this one college student. And this was,
that was a great speech.
You know what I'm talking about. Okay.
I absolutely do. And I cheered it when I saw it live when it first showed up. I'm like, that's exactly right. Everyone should say it like that.
Yeah. And the only thing I add to that with someone who might say that, my brother in particular, I used to say that my brother is so tightly wrapped in the flag, I don't know how he's able to breathe, but that's not my choice. That's his. But when someone says this is the greatest country in the world, I then ask, have you lived anywhere else on the planet?
How would you know? Yep.
How would you know other than what you've been told? I don't even know. And I've been down to Mexico 3 places, and I've been to Ireland a collective total time of a month, and so forth. That still isn't quite enough for me to make that kind of assessment. But my focus is primarily on here and now, myself, my wife, and our 3 cats, our new home, where we live up on this mountain. That's where my focus is. I can't do anything about what's going on in Sacramento or in Washington, in DC, or any of the other states, capitals, et cetera, et cetera. There's nothing I can do about those. What I can do as a person of faith who believes in the metaphysical aspects of our existence is to be the best person that I can be, improve every day of my existence until I'm no longer here, share that with the people around me, just as you do, and hopefully I do actually leave this place better than when I came in almost 66 years ago. And being thankful and grateful for the parents and the siblings, all of them, regardless of where they're coming from, because they have taught me so much. And that's really part of what this program is about. It's, yes, I've got my particular positions, but I got my comeuppance a few times where I would make the statement to the guest, well, there goes another one of my straw huts up in flames, and I'm willing to burn them all to the ground and start over if that's what it takes. Okay? I shared with my sister once that my beliefs of yesterday are not my beliefs of today, are not my beliefs of tomorrow. And with that,
that's right.
I want to remind you folks, James, I almost said the wrong name there, James Chesterton. JamesChesterton.com is the website we'll be linked to, and his book, of course, is, The Ashes of the Republic. We hope you'll get a copy as we continue here on Tell Me Your Story. James, I want to thank you. This has been a wonderful conversation. I don't want people to get the wrong impression. Oh, no, James and I are lockstep. We agree on everything that we've been talking about. No, we don't. And that wasn't the point of this conversation. It was to get people to open their eyes to the realities of the way things are, and that even in our own Constitution, Jim, it also does say that we, the people, we have within one of the articles, and I don't remember exactly which, I think it was Article 2 maybe, that we have the constitutional right to say enough is enough. We're starting over. You are all done in the three branches or two or what
Hmm.
have you. And we, the people for whom this country was created, we get to decide. And we're starting over. We can do that.
Yep.
It's the question is, do we have the will, the public will, the citizenry will to do that? It's like, well, you go to vote. Well, great, great. That's wonderful. But somehow, some way, that to me is where it's going to come down to you and me and all of the rest of us. What is it? 330, 320? I always thought it was 350, but I always found it fascinating that the other countries like China and India, who are over a billion, keep
Hmm.
growing, but we seem to be sort of in the
Well,
same
that's
spot.
going down now because so yeah, the birth rate is
Yeah,
lower. Although I just saw somewhere that said they might
it's
come up,
it's
but
yeah,
the
it's
birth
very
rate is lower, which is why, by the way, you need immigration.
yeah.
But
But
China,
I appreciate your insights and the
I appreciate the
conversation, and
conversation.
I
It was great.
wish
I
you
love these conversations.
much success with the book. I really do,
Appreciate it.
and hope that maybe we can get together again in 6 months, and maybe who knows, things will be a little different. Maybe
No, this
well,
is exactly right. 6 months it could be either direction.
I mean, things
The
move so
midterms are
fast
coming,
now.
so yeah,
Yeah.
we'll see. It'll be interesting to see what happens with the midterms.
I have three final questions that I want to ask you. I ask all of my guests. Before I do, I want to thank you for listening to and watching Tell Me Your Story. New paradigms for a new world, giving you choices and knowledge of those choices to help make your dreams come true. We are here on Sundays at 7 a.m. and 7 p.m., Monday mornings at 1 a.m., Wednesdays at 9 a.m., and we are also here Monday through Friday from 8 to 9 a.m., streaming live at all 9 times at richarddugan.com with podcasts on SoundCloud, iTunes, TuneIn Radio, Spotify, Stitcher, Player FM, Blueberry, iHeart, Radio, Amazon Music, and we're on YouTube and Rumble where you can watch these conversations as well. We hope that you'll subscribe and click notification. Please go to Amazon.com and get a copy of my book, Choices 5 Steps for Life, available in hardcover, paperback, and Kindle. And if you can leave us a tip, we'd be gratefully appreciative. Whatever amount you can. PayPal is our tip jar. And just put in my email address, richard@richarddugan.com, and send us what you can. If you can, we'll take energetic support as well. And we also ask that you take some time during this decade of perfect vision, the 2020s, to spend some time going within to that quiet, peaceful, calm, still place, a heck of a lot calmer than on the outside, let me tell you, and listen to and follow the promptings of that still small voice. With all that being said, we go to our final three questions for our very special guest. This has just been a wonderful conversation, and I hate to see it come to an end, but maybe we'll pick it up somewhere. My question number one is, who is James Chesterfield?
Someone who's very concerned about the world we're giving my kids, our kids. I have two, 23, 21. Uh, very concerned that we're not taking what's happening seriously enough.
What gets you up in the morning?
Uh, right now, my dog. Um, but no, actually, so these days it's the book's coming out in April, so at the end of the month. So uh, doing all the things I need to do to make sure everything's right there.
And finally, what was your best day?
My daughter being born.
Uh,
I was an only child, so the moment that happened, it's still when the doc lifted her up, and that will always be the one moment because yeah, I didn't really have a sense of family. I didn't grow up with that, so the idea I just
hmm.
started one with my wife will forever blow my mind away.
Well, once again, we thank you so much for being a part of the work we're doing here on Tell Me Your Story. And I thank you for listening to and watching Tell Me Your Story. Until our next broadcast, podcast, videocast, love to Lal. Jeanette, I'm still listening. Dad, continue to be happy because I am. Smokey, I'll see you on the other side. Mike, thanks for being in my life and letting me be in yours. And to my dear friend Zorro, aho, aho.